Welcome back to the final part of the Commercial Credit and Collections Conference. My name's Colin White from Credit Connect Media. Here today, we're in our fourth session of the day. Previously, we looked at fraud, we've looked at insolvency, credit risk as well, was where we began. And now we're moving on to our final session today. We're going to look at technology and credit management. The irony is we've had a couple of technical issues today in some of our other sessions. So the irony always appears, isn't it, whenever we mention technology. Before we go into the session, I just wanted to point to everybody to your control panel in front of you, usual stuff if you joined us before, but there's information, it's obvious stuff really, information on the event, information on our face-to-face event, which we're going to be running on the 17th of November in Manchester. If people are interested in attending that at the Midland Hotel, we're going to look to start with a round table and may go into something bigger, you never know. But in November, we're looking to run that. So there's information on that. If you want to register for that now, that'd be great. A bit of information on our speakers as well, list down. There's a couple of things you can download, future resources. But more importantly, we've got a speech bubble icon. So if you've got any questions that you want to put to our panel, our chair Ian Leslie will put that to them and they will run through that if they get time. There'll be a review of this event shared afterwards as well, so we'll include any questions that we don't cover off, and also we'll include some poll results as well, which we've run across the day. But enough from me. Let me hand over to Ian Leslie, who's from Marsh, who will introduce us to the panelists and get the conversation going. So Ian, over to you. Thank you.
Yep. Cheers. Thank you, Colin. Look, for those of you that were on the first session, unfortunately, you're going to hear this twice for the intro for myself. For those that are only joining this session, as Colin said, my name is Ian Leslie. I work at Marsh in their specialty division, predominantly looking at trade credit. So technology isn't really my forte, but it is something which I'm keen on seeing what the panelists are going to bring to this, because it's an industry that we've relied on heavily over the last 2 years for obvious reasons, but it's one in which the role of technology in credit management is a massive one, and one that is just growing and growing and growing, whether that's artificial intelligence or AI, machine learning, and the impact that those two things have. But there'll be very little conversation from me, I'll be glad to hear, but it's all about getting our expert panelists' thoughts on how this will shape the future of credit management. So let's start by introducing our speakers. So Gina, if I can come to you first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gina Muln. I work for the HUD Group, and my experience in credit started off in South Africa, and from there I moved to the UK. So I've been doing it for a few years. I tend to work previously between the UK and America, and currently still involved with America, being with the HUD Group, but more heavily focused in the UK business and Europe.
Excellent. Thank you, Gina. Martin, coming to you second.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So I'm Martin Kirby, Head of Credit Risk and Collections at Scottish Water Business Stream. So we work across both markets, England and the UK, around 700,000 customers, all in the B2B space generally. Prior to that, I was with Kier, the construction company in Manchester, tended to be, for the last 10 years, all UK bound. Previously was Northern Europe credit manager for CHEP, so I have done the Europe and the rest of the world as well.
Cool, thanks, Mine. And last but no means least, Ian.
Hi everyone. So apart from a 4-year initial dalliance with banking when I left school, I've been involved in trade credit really most of my working life. I've been a credit manager now for over 25 years, working exclusively in trade credit, B2B credit, across a wide number of industries, including drinks, motoring, energy. So, being around the block, so to speak. I've been at Karndean now for 7 years. Karndean is a luxury vinyl tile manufacturer and supplier based in Evesham in Worcestershire, and we are probably 85% UK sales, but I'm also responsible for the export business as well, which goes as far afield as the Falkland Islands, would you believe?
Cool, thanks for that, Ian. Right, well, look, as Colin said earlier, ironically, today has been a little bit interesting when it comes to tech issues, but luckily, using systems such as this is not on one of the topics. But Martin, if I come to you first for the first question, do you think the last 2 years and how we've adapted as an industry will mean a greater reliance on technology for the credit managers going forward?
Thanks, Ian. Definitely so. I mean, many organisations had to accelerate their digital capability. We were one of them. And just 2 years on from that, if you think, or 18 months on from that, our digital capability now is probably at 50 or 60% in contact to customer, whereas before it was probably 10%. The interesting phenomenon, I think, for me is customers are also demanding that digital capability, that digital interaction, and they're wanting us to, send them a link to make a payment, allow us to connect to them via WhatsApp to do a face-to-face. So I think all that digital space has really accelerated on. It's about now trying to get maximised return on that digital space, making sure that we get the customer to accept it and then to come back to us via that. And we're starting to see that a lot. I think other parts of the tech as well, we still have to deal with remote working on many systems, whether that be on a Citrix or whether that be on a direct dial or whatever that is. We've still got to deal with that. And I think that's starting to get there as well. But technology for me, I think has really accelerated, and it's been a great accelerator with payments and open banking. So that's our experience today, Ian.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on those points, Martin. I think it's something that we talked about a lot before the pandemic hit, about trying to become more agile, and then we were almost kind of forced into it, and it accelerated that whole process. You mentioned about some of the trends or the demand, coming from the customers. Have those stayed even now that there's a return to some level of normality? Are people still wanting to use the digital side?
I think it has stayed, and I think they do want to. I think we have pockets of customers that are a bit more traditional based, certainly in water utilities, that will want us to call them. I always keen to see our CSAT score around that, and some customers just want us to discuss their account with us. So we will always have a pocket of customers, but generally the volume customers want to be connected digitally. They want to be able to respond as well in that way. So I think it's going to be around for now forwards, Ian.
Cool. Thanks, Martin. Thank you. Gina, coming to you second. Is there any technology trends that you're seeing in the industry at the moment?
I've heard quite a few, bits of chatter about. I know a few people are looking at moving towards Workday Finance. I think previously Workday was only looked at as more of an HR system. So now it's been looked at as a complete solution. But as mentioned previously, customers are looking for more online experiences. I found that EDI is very common in the States, but doesn't seem to be as common in the UK. But we find our customers are pushing more for the POs to be acknowledged via EDI instead of it coming back. The invoice is going to them via EDI. So from our side, we're trying to push that from the credit and AR side to make sure that the whole EDI process is complete instead of just working from the one side. I also think that people are moving towards more direct debit agreements. That came in a while ago, and then it was sort of put on hold over COVID, but that seems to be coming back in. And a lot of customers are also looking towards portal adoptions. So we know Amazon works on a portal. There's so many other companies that work on portals as well. And I think that's going to become a lot more common.
Mm-hmm. The increase in terms of the DD agreements you were talking about, has that helped credit management in terms of making things a little easier, knowing that that's something that you don't have to chase? Is that something that you kind of welcome as a trend?
I do, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know how the others feel about that.
I think we have to. I agree, Gina. I think we have to have some alternatives though, because one thing the pandemic learned us is people immediately cancel direct debits to take control of their finances, especially businesses, and then getting them back in place, getting your penetration back up is quite a long burn. So I think we have to have alternatives to that as well, and there are alternatives available today. You see many organisations able to do bank-to-bank via link, bank-to-bank via QR code, and I think these, where there's no acquirers as well, so we're taking that middleman acquirer out as well. So I think cost effectively going forward, I think we'll give customers choice. Direct debit would be our number one choice, and we can, apply discounts to that if you're going to do that. But, and a good alternative will be a frictionless payment route. So click or go here via the portal as well, would be my opinion. So I think the answer is we have to have multiple ways to pay, and those multiple ways need to be accepted by the customer where they can.
And I think there's a lag, particularly in some sectors anyway. I mean, Cardine, for example, still receives something like 300 or 400 checks a month. A company I was working at previously in the agricultural sector, there are still out there a lot of old generation farmers paying their bills by check. And so I think there is sector variances quite substantially. But as things move, there is clearly a demand for more technology, more automatic interactions rather than the human interactions. Although the pandemic actually reversed that slightly for us, so perhaps cover that off separately somewhere. Ian.
Yeah, one of the questions you may or may not have been primed for. Gina, coming back to you, obviously, Martin talked around the reliance and the fact that the acceleration had led to an increased reliance on technology. For yourself and in your sector and at your company, have you seen an acceleration of digital adoption?
We have. We've moved more because we have such a high volume of payments. So, auto posting of payments to account. The next step is auto allocation of payments. So that's pretty much where we're looking at the moment. And then I think something that everybody does now and again is they go, well, is our ERP system servicing our needs? So I think that's always a consideration as well. And then trend-wise, it really comes down to business requirements and how the decision makers take technology into account. And also if they're looking for a best overall experience, if it's more focused on operations or management or the employee experience, and then the people that also have that trust in AI platforms, and which will really bring a lot of change to the industry.
Yep, can agree. Ian, just to finish this on yourself, acceleration in digital is something you've seen where you are, or is it not quite the same?
No, not really, not a lot. Yes, there is. The last few years have seen some acceleration, and there's clearly a generational switch, as if you like the sort of younger generation sort of take over. I mean, we have a lot of customers that are, for want of a better word, lifestyle companies. Their father, sons, husband, wives, those sorts of small companies, and they are, as they move from one generation to another, there is clearly a change in the way they want to do things. But that acceleration is not massive. It's quite a slow trend, particularly in certainly in the flooring industry. But I'd probably go wider and say it's across the construction sector. I mean, there's still a lot of customers out there in those type of sectors who are quite happy to phone in, place an order, pay by card, all those sorts of things. They don't want to interact digitally. They just want to phone up, speak to somebody, make sure we got the stock, pay for it, and place their order. You'd be amazed at how much there is still a demand for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, one of the signs of that, Ian, was the fact you mentioned checks earlier, which was a talking point on the first session that we did, because it was almost the sectors that those panelists were in almost unheard of that you would receive a check. Whereas obviously you're saying that it's almost not commonplace, but it's certainly one of the payment routes
I
you
mean,
have.
I mean, it would be probably third in our ratio of payments. I mean, obviously the most payments we get are electronic transfer of funds, but and we get a fair amount of card payments. So we're taking more card payments than checks, but we're still taking several hundred checks a month. Now, obviously, there are some customers out there that are using it deliberately as a means of just squeezing a few extra days on the clearance of the checks, etc., knowing that maybe you don't bank them today or tomorrow. But there's still a reluctance for some people to move to a more modern form of payment.
Yep, exactly. I can honestly say that checks are not something I use myself very often. So, but there we go.
Well, I mean, just to close that off, I mean, we obviously deal with other currencies. I mean, for example, getting an Irish customer's check, is a nightmare. It can take literally weeks to clear a check from Ireland. So it's not good for us either. So as a business, we're looking at all ways we can to actually try and get rid of accepting check payments as quickly as we can. But that means, interacting, that means moving on technologically within our own business and what we're doing.
You're saying that there is plans to look at something like that, or is that more of an upgrade?
Yeah. So I mean, we, as a business, we've never done direct debit, but and part of the reason is that because of the way that our payment terms are structured, we actually do get probably 50% of our monthly money on time for terms. So the appetite for moving to direct debit would be difficult initially, simply because you've got to offer something extra for customers to switch, because if they're already paying on time, why make the switch? So it's always been a reluctance, but it is something that we're now looking at quite positively and looking to introduce sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, certainly, because we see direct debit as a much better option going forward for quite a few of our customers.
It's interesting, Ian, that you mentioned the Irish market, because previously when I was working in white goods, I was involved very heavily with Ireland. And I found that a lot of the customers, they wanted that interaction. They wanted you to pick up the phone. They wanted somebody to swing by and pick up the check and arrange to put it in post.
Yeah, and I can state from experience, certainly when I was in the agricultural sector not that long ago, it wasn't. There were a lot of farmers that wanted to give the check to the rep. Yeah, they wanted the rep coming up their drive, sitting down, having a cup of coffee, and collecting the check. And we're talking less than 10 years ago here, so it's not. We're not talking the 60s or 70s. We're talking relatively recently, and there's a lot of that. But those farmers, as they move to their sons maybe don't interact the same. So I think there is a slow, in certain sectors, there is a switch, and that switch is slowly coming on as generations move.
There you go. Well, it's like I said, it's interesting to see the differences. I said, from what the three of you are having in terms of payment styles, especially when we're comparing it to the conversations on first thing this morning. Now, Ian, I'm going to stick with yourself, but we're going to change gear a little bit and look at trade credit as an industry. Now, it has had some movements towards being more digital in the last probably 5 to 10 years. I won't say a couple of years, because it probably hasn't done a lot in the last 2. But recognizing there is still quite a way to go for this sector, how do you personally feel that technology is being used in that industry, and what improvements would you like to see moving forward?
I think there are. I mean, I've been a bit of a dinosaur, really, in terms of credit manager. go to meetings now, meet other credit managers, and virtually all of them are younger than me. But I hark back to the almost unheard of credit manager that used to sit across a table with a customer, have a chat, talk about the business, and gut feel make a decision on credit and how much credit, just like your old-fashioned bank manager would do. And actually, that hasn't gone away. I mean, I was out seeing customers Thursday, Friday last week, and based on those meetings, we have made some positive decisions about credit limits that we wouldn't have done without those meetings. So, I think there's still a huge demand for that. Certainly at the top level, in terms of making decisions about big limits, big exposures, there's still a huge demand, and I don't think you can take away that in that whole gut feel as a credit manager, that inner feeling. You can't do everything by algorithms and systems. But that said, there is a clear interaction with the advancement of credit reference data. Things are continually developing. The credit reference agencies will all tell you about how advanced their systems are now, and certainly they're a lot better than they have been. But nevertheless, you can pull a credit report from one agency, pull it from another, and they're completely different. So, where do you go? Where do you rely? Relying on technology as a total reliance is still probably not there. So I think there's a lot of demand really from the true old-fashioned credit managers like me. There's still a feeling that perhaps some of that old-fashioned nature of credit management is not quite being taken up somewhere in the technology. And I'm not really sure how you actually do it anyway, because like I say, it's a lot of this stuff is, at the end of what does credit mean? Well, it means to trust. So how do you factor trust into some sort of technology in terms of credit decisions? So I'm talking about credit decisions here rather than anything else, but trying to factor those sorts of things in, very difficult. So I think there's from people like me in terms of credit risk decisions, we're sort of heading the right way, but it's just about how we can develop that more in terms of what's out there. In terms of general sales ledger work, there's a hell of a lot of stuff that as a credit manager I ain't got a clue about. I'll be honest with you, never used it, and probably could use a lot more of it. But I think sometimes there's a overwhelming sense of what's out there. So how do you, as a credit manager who hasn't used a lot of technology, how do you start that process in terms of AI, in terms of auto allocations, in terms of upload? I mean, we like to think, I believe that Cardine as a business has advanced hugely in the few years that I've been here in terms of what we do and what we don't, and how we use a limited amount of technology, but it's making that next step. And some companies are naturally averse to fast-paced change. Cardine's still a family-owned business, so it still has some of those traits of a family-owned business that sometimes takes a little bit of time to make decisions about technology. So it's almost, how do I explain it? It's almost as if technology, sometimes there's so much of it out there. If you're not using any of it, where do you start?
Yeah, it's a good question. Now I want to open this one up to the floor. So Gina, Martin, just to your comments in terms of trade credit as an industry and what improvements you guys would like to see. So Gina, if I can start with you.
Well, I had an incident last week, and I was actually in contact with someone from Marsh about this, because I was looking at a customer and what the customer was telling us versus the DNB report versus the credit insurer versus company's house. All of the information was different. And it's really difficult. So I was sending DNB messages saying, can you please update this? Can you please confirm that everything is correct? And they did update it a little bit later that day, so they were quite quick. But at that point, I think everybody had hit a flat panic already. So they will need to look at how quickly and how accurate their information is, because it can have serious impact to customers. And then I also find that they're a little bit behind in that, if we want to change links, if we want to say, find common information between the credit insurer and our ERP systems. If you ask, can I do a download, add the information, do an upload, can we customize it at all? The answer is no. So that's with the insurer that we're working with. And also it would be nice to be able to automate it so that you could link it, our system to their system, to make sure that the credit limits that are put in are correct. And if anything changes, there would be a more valid alert instead of just a general alert going, oh, this company is in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I think, your first point around the information, I think is key, because again, that came up this morning in terms of the validity of financial information, whether that's actually audited, annual reports, or it's management accounts. How much faith can you put in them? So I do think there's a real challenge. I won't say it's an issue. There's a real challenge for the credit industry at the moment. Is trying to make make your way through all that information to work out what's right and what's wrong, so you can make that as accurate decision as possible. And your second point on the linking to ledger, to me, that's where we should be aiming to get to a point where a lot of the admin, and this is some of the more basic admin in terms of managing your policy or essentially managing your ledger, is taken away by automation. Because you don't want the decision to particularly automate it, because you still want to empower the credit management to be able to do it. But requesting credit limits, that kind of stuff, would be so much easier if it was just automated and allows you to really focus on getting the most out of your policy rather than spending your day doing the boring stuff. Martin, any thoughts for you in terms of trade credit as an industry and any improvements that you would like to see?
I think for me, the major improvement has to be around identity, and really start to get identity digitized. So, we can quickly reach the right organization that is the person I'm supplying with. And some of the more, future technologies like blockchain and co will have identity sorted as part of that process, and is well on the way. So I think when some of that crosses back over to the more day-to-day credit management, I think that will be a massive help. And echo Gina's comments. I really want on my left hand my credit risk or my CRA to provide me with instant information that's updated, that is correct, but it is quite a bit of effort to get that, I suspect, in most organisations. I mean, we data share as well, and you can tell from just the match rate on data sharing, us sharing our ledger performance in the keys, in the commercial keys network. We're just getting that correct is difficult, but it really works when you do get the high percentages. So for me, let's get better on identity, guys. Let's really put some time behind identity, I think. And then on the right hand side, the other thing for me that we just have to get is a frictionless payment. We've got to make it so our customers can reach, pay, go, and do it all in one go, as opposed to having to call us back and to call them back. So those are the things I think that credit management really wants. And I think the whole role of credit management has really changed, certainly spurred on in the last couple of years. We're effectively, many credit managers today are also project managers, because we're effectively looking at trying to improve the next pathway, and we'll need to understand, many of us already are business case writers. Many of us already are board report writers. So I think the whole of that credit management professional landscape, what they need to do, how they need to be able to be great at stakeholder management, how they really need to understand stakeholder management, has all changed. And I think it'd be great to sort of wrap that up more correctly in the professional qualification as well going forward.
Yep, thanks, Martin. I want to stick with yourself though, and sticking in terms of looking at moving the industry forward, and looking particularly at the impact that you foresee that AI will have, so AI and machine learning, should I say, will have on the credit management industry?
Ian, all I can say is just one word for AI or machine learning. It's just amazing. It just is absolutely amazing. We've run a couple of projects this year, one on customer acquisition, using an AI to find, following some clear models that were already laid down, so I'll use simply the Virgin example. So, there's a big housing estate. Who do you market to get your broadband? Who's likely to pay? Who's likely to have your service? Where AI just makes that just a straightforward choice. Go there, they will. Go there, they will. And we did similar on acquisition this year. Having so many water distribution points, millions of them. Where do we go first? Who do we go to try and supply first? And the data in the data lakes that are linked in with the AI models can easily make that so much more effective. Simply don't bother with those. They've already got a water supplier. These ones haven't got a water supplier. And just all that simple decisioning engine that AI gives you, I think is really clear for credit. I think in collections as well, we're very close to using AI where, rather than chase my customer for payment, why don't I chase the ones I know that are not going to pay, and the one that's likely to pay, chasing in a slightly different priority order. So just bringing that priority order onto the dialer automatically with that propensity across the top should make us a lot smarter. So I think AI has got a massive place. I wish there were more organisations where it was plug and play AI, so we could just lift that organisation up and say, can you help with that? But that's still not quite developed yet. There are a couple of organisations that can do plug and play, but it's still not quite out there. It's certainly not like RPA, for example, where you'd fight the vendors off. We're not in that sort of marketplace yet.
Yeah. And Martin, I asked this question on the spot here, but what do you think the barriers for entry, in terms of a business that's looking to use AI, machine learning in their credit management? Like, how easy is it for somebody to implement it? You're talking obviously the data lakes. That means you're going to have a fair amount of information, I guess, to start. But how easy is it for businesses to pick this up?
I think the bigger the organisation, and the ones that are still operating on pseudo legacy systems, the data part of that is the difficulty. Getting that data out and then allowing the AI guys to work with that data. Organisations that have been in some of the more construction areas or manufacturing areas have been doing that for a while, so they've already been involved in the big data. Wanting to know exactly where their nuts went on a bridge to see if it was anything to do with that bridge falling down. So, that massive big data piece. They've already had those models using IBM, Watson, and all those organisations that have in that manufacturing space that have been in there. It's going to be quite fast for them because they're already organised and already sorted. But, AI will use unstructured anyway, so it's really easy for it to run on across the top of unstructured, which before we never were able to do that. So I think more modern organisations a lot faster because they'll be more agile, and most of their stuff may be in the cloud. In the cloud makes it a bit more uniform, so very easier to do. Large organisations with a legacy system, very difficult. And I guess the reason I'm saying that is like in a water company, quite difficult. Most of our systems are still a bit legacy. So.
Okay. Just that mind. And Gina, I'll come to you first. Is that machine learning, AI, anything you've seen implemented your side? Is that something that you're looking into at all where you are, or is it still a way off?
No, we haven't looked at implementing it at all, which is quite interesting because the HUD group has its own cloud and its own technology division. And so we're actually perfectly set up to move into AI. But I think, and many businesses, not relating to this one, but I think Ian would probably find it as well, that your decision makers might not trust AI. So it's the same as not wanting to move away from checks and to online banking. They don't quite trust the machine.
Yeah.
And then I also think when people talk about AI in business, just in general, AI isn't understood. But even in business, going, well, what's the difference having an AI system versus, our standard SAP or Oracle system? What's the difference? People don't know. So Martin sounds really knowledgeable, and yeah, I'd love to pick your brain a bit more. But looking at a system where you can type in a conversation more than than looking for information. So saying, send me a debtors report, and the system does it for you. It's almost, it seems a bit ridiculous. It's almost unheard of, and people don't realize that you can do that with AI, and that the system learns and what you do, and it follows what you do, and it points out where you're wasting time, and it asks questions that you would never have thought to ask. It gives you information, and you're like, wow, I didn't even think I would ask that question.
I mean, there are systems out there, Ian, that will give you what they call a virtual agent prompt. So the virtual agent will remind the collector what he doesn't know or forgot about. So the collector then gets a more informed call. I mean, that's in flight today. That's not nothing new, and that's using AI.
It's seriously impressive, and you hear it obviously, use in terms of credit management space, but there's so many other applications. Just that being able to, like you were saying, around it knowing, because of history, this is all based on analytics and historic events, but knowing that certain, customers in a certain area will predominantly do a certain thing, whether that's pay late or whatever, that element of knowledge is just crazily powerful. Ian, feel free to move me on quickly, but is there anything you wanted to add on to that?
Do you know what? I have to admit, I think I'm one of those people that just find the whole thing very scary.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you. I find it very scary. It's not to say that there are clearly benefits to some of this stuff, and it's but certainly as a credit manager, not stuff I've ever worked with, and as a business, I think, as Gina said, there's a lot of mistrust out there in terms of, I'm probably part of the problem. A lot of mistrust in, how far you go with this stuff. And it's hard. I mean, because you can, and I did an exercise quite a few years ago now, down at Canary Wharf in the Hermes, with about 15 trade credit managers. We all sat there with a certain amount of information. And the insurers asked us how much cover we would give for each and every one of them. And then we did about 12 business cases. And we all came up with different figures, because we all come from different backgrounds. Our business experience is different. Our scale of business will make £50,000 to somebody seem small, £50,000 to somebody else seem very large. So, this sort of logics that we have inbuilt in our brains from years of experience. How do you get AI to do that? And can you trust it? I guess is, I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that's the concern, if you like, from old heads like me.
A question for you, Martin, and I promise this is the final unprompted question that I'll throw over your way. But you obviously, Ian raises a good point around trust. And one of the things when you were talking about that I thought of was on an earlier session, we were talking about empowering credit managers, and especially given the current times, giving them more authority than they had before. How does AI and machine learning, how does that work when you're trying to, you obviously don't want it to replace what the credit manager is doing. So how do you then empower staff to have the final decision, but make best use of the technology? I don't know whether we've conveniently lost Martin at that point.
Sorry, conveniently back. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine, mate.
I think it's the enabler to the better decision. For the first time today, we have all that AI data on one hand, and then we have that feeling or that gut feeling of used something we said earlier from the collector or the collector's training or on the other hand, and it's really just the enablement of both of those. So now I'm now, the collector, if you like, or the agent making that decision is now enabled with that data, and that data is my data. So it's not generally data we've gone to get. We've generally used information that we provided. So I'm going to say that data is good because we made that, we created that at some point in the past. So I think the AI will do that. I think the other thing though as well, it'll make the collector smarter. And we have, I don't know, 100 collectors on the floor, and the guys are always championing, challenging to collect the most. If they've got a tool that allows them to collect the customers that are more likely to pay faster, or more likely to pay if they call them, then they're just going to want to grab that tech and say, I want that, because I want to be the best collector, I want to collect the most. So I think it's an enabler in that collection process to a better decision.
Thank you, Martin. And that is the last unprompted question, I promise. Sorry, Gina, go on.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask Martin something. Do you find that using AI, that your teams are moving more into system monitoring than alongside credit control?
It's a great question, Gina. I think if I could take a leap into virtual collection and have a virtual collector talking to the customer and then handing it off, I think I probably would agree an hybrid model there would be better. We're not there yet, and we are quite a way from that virtual collection piece. In my organisation, it is out there. But I think probably to answer that succinctly, I would say 60% would be actual collection, 30% monitoring, 35% monitoring maybe in that scenario.
Okay, so we are at the last of our questions. So just to shout out to anybody, if you do want to ask the panel a question, you can do using the button that Colin mentioned earlier. So you've still got a couple of minutes if you want to pop a question to the panelists. But the best one, the last one, even though, which I'm going to start with Gina first. Is there any best practices that you would recommend to your peers when trying to utilize technology?
I think in any technology, it always comes at a cost. So I would say look internally first. I know that sometimes departments don't speak well to each other. I think in every business we have a problem with communication. And looking at your current ERP system, you might look and go, well, it doesn't do what I need it to do, but it may be able to. Many companies may have requested that add-on to be created previously. So if you're just looking at one area that needs improvement, always go back to the source of your ERP system and see if they can assist you before going external or looking elsewhere, or just thinking it can't be done and carrying on as you are now. Always challenge and always ask the question. And then it also depends on your decision makers and how open they are to technology changes and just in general how the company works. So if your decision maker isn't going to give the go ahead on AI, they might not, or changing from checks to direct debit, you're a bit stuck because the decision maker is not behind you. So you have to get buy-in from everybody. So it's getting that buy-in, looking internally, see if there's going to be impacts to any other areas of the business. And then I think, especially when we're looking at the more digital side of things, your sales team usually deal with the buyers. You need a direct contact. I think any of us that have dealt with or had problems on, say, John Lewis portal or an Amazon portal or any of them, if you don't have a direct contact or somebody that you can speak to and say, I'm really stuck, it's almost impossible to get anything done. And it's quite soul-destroying for the team.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned of the communication point. Again, that came up earlier, and like Riley said, that point of contact, whether that's through the sales team or someone you've got directly, that's really, really important.
So if you look at the training, they always train in the best case scenario. So in a perfect world, this is how you do things. And then you go, right, okay, something went wrong. But there's no training. There's nothing that says, okay, if this doesn't work, this is what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be so helpful if training had that, okay, if something goes wrong, this is your next step. So that's why it's so important to have that contact on the other side, so you can get hold of them and say, right, this has gone wrong. What do I do?
Mm. No, completely agree. Ian, I'd like to come to you next.
Yeah, I think buy-in, as Gina said, buy-in from above is so important. I mean, as a business, I think certainly going back to that dreaded lockdown one, we reverted more to telephone personal contact than we have ever moved. Virtually every customer was covered by phone rather than traditionally the dunning letters and stuff like that. We moved almost exclusively to phone, and actually it was incredibly successful, to the point where when you're now starting to turn that around and starting to say, well, actually we need some technology here or here, that then you've got people above you saying, well, hang on a minute, didn't that work really well? Well, yeah, it did, but it can't stay like that. So I think buying from above. I also think hearts and minds. I think, depending on your team. I mean, I've got quite a mature team, so most of whom have been with the business a lot longer than me and are used to doing it our way. So change management is incredibly difficult when you have a team that's quite reticent to change, and trying to implement new system, new processes, whatever it is, but certainly systems in particular. I think people have a natural, after you've been working in a department or working in a certain role for a while, that there is a natural resistance to new systems or new versions of new systems upgrades and all those sorts of things. There can be quite a natural resistance over a period of time because the last one didn't go particularly well, etc., etc. So it's a huge. I don't think there's enough time put into hearts and minds, as daft as it sounds. I think that's a key element going forward.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. One of the most important things when you're trying to implement any change is, like you said, getting that buy-in, people understand the why. Because, even in today's, world, there's always going to be split generations within teams, which means that moving to a new system's never as easy as you think it is. So.
No, and I mean, you can take that down to the customer level. You can ring a customer who says, "Don't ring me. I don't ever want to be rung. Email me," or some other means. Or you've got the complete opposite. We have got complete opposite customers who say, I don't look at my emails. Phone me. So having that sort of broad brush of customers, that spectrum of customers, your whatever technology you're bringing in has to be one that both enhances your performance with the customer base you have and meets the customer expectations as well.
Yeah, and those processes that you implemented, obviously during the pandemic, that obviously were successful. You saw an improvement. Have you still retained those now? Then are they still in?
There quite a few. I mean, we've tried wherever possible to really maximise where method of communication was the most effective. So it was, in a lot of cases, the most effective means was phone. There were some that wasn't. And we've tried to learn from that in terms of the individual controllers building those relationships. Because what we found was, we took a view. We had a lot of customers who were, not finding it easy with their shops closed and so on and so on. It was incredibly difficult to just turn around and say, well, I can pay all my suppliers on time, etc., etc. So having those having the decisions that we took about how we were going to try and help our customers through this, with the express intention of making sure that as many of our customers were there post-pandemic as possible, to carry on growing the brand. We believe our account customers are partners rather than just customers. So there was a lot of work done to try and build that relationship and use the pandemic as a means of building that relationship, if you like. So what we've tried to do is keep the method of communication appropriate for the customer. So if the customer wants a phone call, he gets a phone call. If the customer wants an email, he gets an email. And that's, the most effective way of building a relationship and ultimately getting paid as quickly as you want to be paid, really.
No, I would agree with that. And then last but no means least, Martin, anything that you would recommend?
I think it only works if you can get sponsorship. So I think for me, what you really need to do is share your vision and really get people to share the vision, whether that be visually, whether that be process-wise, but really understand where you want to get to and what the time frame is. And I think we're right. We've got to bring teams on that journey. So sometimes it's really important to understand how we're going to do that, because we'll have different. Some that have been there 20 years, some that have been there 2 years. So definitely embrace the stakeholder. Definitely help them share the vision, and bring them along right at the beginning of that journey. And I think the rest should flow quite well. Most organisations want cash to be king, as we know, and they want to be at the forefront of being able to do that at the best possible they can. So I think to sell the idea is pretty good. It's just how you do that. And sometimes in large organisations, you'll need to try and work out where the window to make that change is, and that's more complex than some. If you're on a transformation journey like we are, there's very little window to do that. So when you do it, you have to do it really on time and correct with too much failure. So stakeholder, share your vision, bring other stakeholders on, really do your social ability around the boardroom to do that, and choose your time, and don't forget the staff.
Yeah, I like that. And 100% agree with that. Any last thoughts? Anyone want to add anything else in? Just we run through that. All good, brilliant. Well, look, thanks for your time. So thanks, Gina. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Martin. It's been a really good session. Thank you for everyone, obviously, who's been listening in as well virtually. We had a brilliant on the technology one. We had no technology issues, which is nice. So there you go, Colin. At least we've ended at a high, at least.
No, thanks, Ian. Yeah, I know. That's what I was thinking. That I was waiting for the next panic on technology today, but it's been all right. The irony of ironies, but there you go. No, thank you, Ian, Gina, and obviously Martin dialed in as well. Really good, interesting feedback, and good to hear. I always like the contrasting views. I never like the we all agree with the same thing. So that's really good. Really appreciate that. Thank you for that session. Just really want to round off. We had some great sessions today. They've all been recorded. Those of you registered, you'll be able to watch them within the next 24 hours. I think we usually get it turned around. So that's really great. So thank you for that. Big thanks, obviously, to Ian Leslie for that session, and Brendan Clarkson earlier from Begbie's for his help as well in chairing the other events that we've had today. Big thank you as well to Begbie's Trainer and Marsh. Without them, we wouldn't run these kind of events. So it's really good to have them on board. Also, big thank you to all of our speakers across the day. They're all listed here. Really big thank you to them. There's so much great insight in there. Even if the technology isn't great, the content I always feel is really strong. So appreciate that. In terms of what we've got coming up for the rest of the year, we are running a couple of consumer collections online events still, but good news in November, and fingers crossed and touching wood about Omicron or whatever it is that might come around, whatever disaster that awaits us. Hopefully there won't be. On the 17th of November, as I mentioned a couple of times earlier in sessions today, we're running a roundtable event looking at commercial credit management and some of the challenges and things that are going to challenge us over the next year or so at the Midland Hotel in Manchester. So if you want to register for that now, we're going to build the registration page soon. But if you want to register for that, drop me an email and we can get you added to our list. That would be good. And tailing that, in the evening, we run an event called the Credit and Collections Technology Awards. Our very own speaker, Martin Kirby, is a judge on that. That rounds up all the technology that's out there. So it might be of interest for you, some credit managers who haven't dipped the toe, to be aware of what kind of technology there is in different areas. And yeah, we're looking to run that as a face-to-face event. So we'll try our best to make that happen. Will there be glitches in real life? Hopefully not. But yeah, that would be great. So enough for me. I'll end today's session and thank everybody for attending, all their contributions and questions. There'll be a write-up on the Credit Connect website soon. But for now, I'd like to round off and say thank you for everybody who's been part of today's event. And we hopefully see you all soon. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.